I'm at work, so I'm kind of a mess.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome to Power Hour. I am so glad that you guys could join me. This is a real treat. And we are talking about boundaries. Boundaries it's big, it's popular, it's even trendy now, but it really is important. And I'd like to toot my own horn, toot toot, besides the volleyball picture that I posted in the email. I wrote a blog on this in 2019, and for the most part, everything is still in alignment. I might change the phrasing on a little bit here and there. But I wrote a blog called Boundaries Are Like Training Wheels. And it's pretty good. So I encourage you guys to check that out. I can put the link in the post when I post this. But boundaries, as far as how they are currently being talked about, displayed, and promoted, is not so helpful and can even be a little bit detrimental. And the reason that that is because one of the things it does is it makes them a big deal. And they are important. So in some ways they are a big deal, but the way that they're being pushed is that they become super significant. And so then we have a tendency to make them bigger than ourselves. As far as then it's our boundaries that define us instead of us defining our boundaries. And then when people talk about how important it is, there tends to be this gravity to it, to where it gets super serious. And then it kind of feels really dense and big. And so it can get hard and even a little bit scary. And that'll start to kick up our resistance to make us less likely to even do them. Another thing that it does is it makes the boundaries all about other people. And it uses other people's reactions and behaviors as the focus of letting you know if you're doing them right or wrong, if they're effective or not effective. So how they respond, how someone else responds to your boundary is what becomes important. So then we start putting our attention, our energy, and the intention of our boundary on someone else doing something or changing how they are, or how it's going to land, like how they're going to receive it. And then it maintains our current addiction and programming to this need for external validation. And what that does then is when we need someone else to do something to let us know that we're okay, that's called an external locus of control. And that always ends up leaving us feeling powerless or resentful, because then it's out of our hands. And we just don't like that. When we make it about other people, that's also going to create an energy of desperation, or we're going to be sort of seeking permission or trying to prove something. A lot of us will have sort of antagonistic ways of, I know I'm being this and my boundaries this, if this, like to sometimes we even try to be a little bit bristly so we know that our boundaries intact. So when we need them to do something, it starts to change the energetic dynamic. So instead of it being about us, for us, it's about someone else. And those are the dynamics that I talk about when I'm talking about relationship and communication dynamics that pretty much messes everything up. And you get lost, you'll dilute the message, or you'll end up pushing too hard because you need it so bad for them to do something else that then you get pushy. And maybe you're using all the right words, but you've got this energetic push, and that immediately gets people to resist you. So sometimes where we're then interpreting that nobody respects my boundaries, it's just because we're coming at it with this, you've got to do this, that doesn't get received well. And so no matter how hard you try, you don't get received. And that usually goes back into our hamster wheel mind that says, this is never going to work. I'm not worth it. Nobody listens to me, and go back into our old stuff. And so there was another power hour that I did a couple of months ago. It was 5 things to kill your relationship. And one of them we talked about was over communicating, when we try too hard to communicate. And when it becomes, when our boundaries are about other people, that's where we tend to like spill out and push too hard. Conventional ways of doing boundaries are also backwards, because the focus is on keeping people or toxic energy out. But toxic can only come in if you let it, and you can only attract it if you've got something that will that matches it. So it's putting it all the onus on someone else and saying it's coming from outside of me, when it's ignoring the internal piece that's allowing the dynamic that's letting this take place. And a lot of times when we're talking about people and, oh, they're so negative or they're so toxic, a lot of it is, it's just energy, and it's just us putting a label on it. And it may not actually be toxic. It might just be unpleasant. It might just be something we don't want to hear. It may very well be something that is damaging and detrimental, but because we're energetic beings, and I'll get to this, when we can let it pass, we don't have to take it in and hold it. So these boundaries are putting so much effort in keeping it out, but if it comes in, it can actually just flow through without harming us. And then if you create this big solid barrier, what ends up happening is you get penned in, and then you become defined by the boundary, by the definition. And this uses a lot of energy to defend. And a lot of people, when we do it this way, we become hyper vigilant because we're constantly on the lookout to see if anybody's threatening our boundaries. So we have to continually be scanning and sweeping. That's going to be physically stressful, just because it's going to take up a lot of mental energy too. But when we're looking for threats or potential threats, what we're actually doing is activating our reticular activating system, that's then going to start paying attention to potential threats and start seeing them everywhere. You know, like on A Beautiful Mind, how he was looking for conspiracies and all the ways it connected, so that he was so set on finding them, he could find them everywhere when they didn't actually exist for everyone else. But then with your focus being outside and now adding some physical stress and worry, you're just now reinforcing a beta brainwave state that's actually going to continue to have you looking outside of yourself for where the threat is, so that whatever insecurity or piece of us that is needing to be healed is never getting addressed, because our attention's always outside of ourselves. So that we end up being kind of diminished out of our life, even though we're trying to do something that's supposed to make our lives better. And so in several ways, this approach isn't working, because it's actually putting you against your subconscious function and getting your subconscious to be looking for threats. So more threats are going to appear. And it's actually not in line or congruence with actual consciousness, which in consciousness, we're all connected. And this is what we know as truth on the other side of the veil. But we're actually always sharing space and swapping molecules. So total separation is a lie. That's why it takes so much energy to put up these big, big barriers. And what happens to one happens to all of us. So, and this is you with all your empathic abilities and your ability to feel feelings, and why it hurts so bad to watch other people be mean. To be mean to you, because you know that's not helping them either, and it hurts, you know, because it's coming this way. But you know how you see somebody and you're like, they're gonna go back out with that guy again, you know, and it kind of hurts because you're just like, please don't, because you can just see them choosing against themselves. Or more and more, as I have gotten older and more sensitive, I cannot stand violent movies. I like them less and less because it is not entertaining. It's actually getting to the point of near physical pain to watch other people create suffering for other people. So that's how, and when you're empathic like that, you're sort of tapped into this already. But this approach isn't working when we put all the attention on someone else either, because that gives all our power away. So we've got to do it different. We need a different approach. Because even though in consciousness, we're all connected, we do have this magical meat suit, and this is my mind space, and I'm having my thoughts that you're not aware of, and I'm having these set of feelings that you're not aware of. So there is some degree of separation here. So how do we sort of navigate this and put it all together? And that's starting to recognize that this magical meat suit of mine, and this head space, and this heart space, and my aura, and my, physical domain, this is my space, and this is where I'm sovereign. But instead of working so hard to keep people out of my space, we start to pay attention to what's going on within it. And so how I see and explain boundaries are sort of like a container that hold us, where we know that we exist. We are sovereign here, but it's flexible, and it's going to allow us to grow and expand as we change. And it's defined by our values, not by situations, not by other people. So that this is where, instead of just being like, I don't talk politics, that's my boundary, I don't talk politics, that you know that with this person, I can talk politics because we can enjoy debate, we can disagree and agree with respect. But in this situation, I do not talk politics because I actually value the person, but I know that we don't align, and it creates a separation that isn't comfortable. So you don't have to say, I should be able to talk politics with anybody and everybody, so I'm going to do that with you and destroy a relationship. And you don't have to say, I don't talk politics, that's just my boundary. And then so nobody can share any kind of information with you, and you're not open to receiving any new information. So that when we have this flexible container, it actually allows flexibility and for it to be defined by our values and what's going to create greater for us in a moment to moment and a specific situation by situation basis. But then what this container does is when we have this place that we're like, this is where I am, and this is how I know I exist, it allows us to fill up from the inside, so that then it's not needing everybody to do what we want so that we feel loved. We start filling it from the inside. And then as we heal and seal the leaks and heal the wounds that are in our container, in our space, that we get to hold even more until we're overflowing. And we're overflowing to where then it's easy to love ourselves, to love other people, to see how they're hurting, to hold them in compassion as well, to know that we can hold them in compassion, but we don't have to have them in our space, and that that's actually loving for both of us. And so there's a whole like greater expanse of possibilities with this. But then the health of the container is your responsibility. But it's actually can be like a labor of love, like a loving gardener or something, like this is my space. I want to keep it nice, like it's your home. And Sadhguru, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's actually a yogi from India, but he's riding a motorcycle around the United States. He's just, but he was saying, I never understood stress management because you manage what you love. And so this can almost be like space management. I manage what I love, and I love myself, and I love the space that I have. So we manage it. So that's ours. It's not about sealing it off so nobody can get in. We're actually just tending to it so that we pay attention to if there's leaks. I had referred to it, I think it was, months ago, I did a power hour on insecurities, and I talked about holes in the boat. When we have these insecurities, and yes, a lot of them are coming from early childhood programming and they're learned, but they're still ours now, but they're where the love seeps out. And it just keeps leaking out to where, if we have this insecurity that nobody's going to listen to me, no matter how many fans or followers I'll have, I just can't feel enough love until I actually challenge that. If I am absolutely convinced that I'm ugly and no one will love me, then it doesn't matter how much my partner will tell me I'm beautiful and pretty, that love just seeps away and we can never fill up. So those kind of insecurities, regardless of where they came from, if they're impacting our container, they're our responsibility to work on and heal. But then once we seal them, we heal them, then it improves the integrity of our container so we can fill up. But now this is a labor of love. It's, again, not about holding people out and saying you're toxic, you can't come in, but we monitor the toxicity levels so that we are aware of how we feel in our body and our mind, and we're paying attention to our thoughts, our emotions, the chemicals that we're letting in. That's food, substances, and emotions. Because if we know we've got some emotional addiction, we're creating a ton of cortisol, that we'd be like, whoa, it's like having a pool, being like, whoa, the cortisol levels are way too high here. We got to get that down. We pay attention to the content that we're consuming and the company that we keep, because people do have energetic influences on us. And there can be some people that like, wow, I'm just going to have to love you from a distance, because when we're together, I can't keep my levels down. But then it makes it all about me and not about them and having to change their behavior. We are also going to have to pay attention to the size of our container. Is it actually big enough to hold us? Or did we let it shrink? Because a lot of us will shrink when other dominating people come in, or we learn to shrink in order to hide ourselves for safety. That's a lot of a survival trait that we got in childhood. Are you actually outgrowing who you've been and you need to expand your container? Are you actually having enough physical space for you? Some of it, we just have varying needs of physical space. And so are you actually meeting your needs? So these are the kind of things that you pay attention to as this loving gardener, taking care of your container, so that you don't have to be monitoring and patrolling the perimeter at all times to make sure nothing comes in. You're just aware of, oh, this is not the energy I was feeling a second ago. What was the shift? And it might be because, oh yeah, I ate gluten last night. Yeah, that's going to happen. Okay, gotta give it some time, get a little extra fluids, get the inflammation down. Or it might be like, oh, I bit into that narrative that I have again about that I can never get heard from my family. And so we have to be like, okay, I told myself that again. All right. And just be aware of what's going on within, because we dwell here. This is a word that I hear a lot of Indian sages and gurus use, and I like it a lot, is dwelling and abiding. This is where we are. This is where we're spending and experiencing this spin on the planet as me, is in this meat suit and head space and heart space and all the spaces that I move to, So this is where we dwell. It should be a sanctuary. And so if I'm going to create that sanctuary, because it's my responsibility, I'm going to choose and pay attention to what I'm consuming, about what I'm actually willing to receive, and what I'm making myself available to where I'm going to start choosing to consume, receive, and make myself available to that which is generative and nurturing. Something that promotes growth, because it's not always going to feel good. Growth doesn't always feel good, but I'm going to turn to, just like a plant, kind of faces the sun. I'm going to start turning to what's going to allow me to grow. So it isn't always, boundaries aren't always going to be nice and fun and pleasant, but they are going to allow for, because, anytime there's growth, there's a little bit of a stretch that can be just a little bit uncomfortable at first, but then it's like, oh, now I got all this ease and space. Look at this. But then I'm going to choose to remove myself or make myself unavailable to that which is damaging. And I just had, a fantastic interaction with my soon-to-be ex, who wanted to roll down my window so he could tell me how awful I was. And I made myself available to that. I actually rolled down the window, and I actually just wanted to be like, what are you doing? He's already in a bad mood, mad at you. Why would you actually roll down the window when he's telling you to roll down the window? I need to make myself unavailable to that. So lesson learned, okay? These things take practice. But we have, it's ours to have, it's our sanctuary to maintain and provide for ourselves. So we take the responsibility to be aware. I don't know, put on my rose-colored positivity glasses and thought that would be different. And it just was a little bit silly of me, and it hurt. But then also to take appropriate action, which was to roll up the window while he was talking and be like, I'm not letting any more of that in. And so we take responsibility for our own actions, for what because a lot of times it hurts when people are hurtful, but we also have to maintain and own our responsibility of, because, and I learned this from a martial arts instructor, when you put yourself in the line of fire, that's your responsibility. Somebody can't kick you if you are not there to kick. And that's in martial arts, physically, emotionally, or even energetically. So knowing where we are, how we are, that's our responsibility. But what is not our responsibility is worrying, managing, or taking any ownership or responsibility for how someone else responds. And I am going to just, I speak a little bit quieter because here's the little caveat piece, is that when we're starting doing boundaries, and a lot of us aren't good at this to start because we didn't see it modeled, that sometimes we can still do it with a little bit too much push and lack some tact. So that sometimes we might be too abrupt in our setting boundaries. And so if you become aware of that, to be willing to apologize, but when you apologize for the delivery, not for the actual boundary. So I'm just gonna kind of put that out there. So it's not your responsibility to worry about how everybody else is gonna be if you do this. And it's not your responsibility to manage their behavior. Unless they are your child or your student, it's not your job to manage to see how they're going to change and respond in accordance to your boundary. That's going to end up leading you into micromanagement, another full-time job of second relationship, whatever, or codependency, because that's how we maintain this dynamic. And it's also not your responsibility to explain yourself why you have a boundary, or to work so extra hard to get them to understand it or agree with you, because that ends up basically having the same energetic as asking for permission. And a lot of us, we want it so bad because in truth, we want this connection. But sometimes it's just not going to be available, at least for a while. But we spend so much time and energy and effort, again, trying to get somebody to understand, because if they understand, then they'd see my point of view and then we'll all be okay. But that's all just nonsense up here. We just have to recognize what our need is and say, I'm going to give that to myself. So the boundary is all about space and your container. You remove or make yourself unavailable to that doesn't support the health of it, and you receive and make yourself available to that which will. It sounds so simple, right? So why do we even struggle in the first place? And for most of us, it's as simple as there was a lack of healthy boundaries coming from childhood. Our childhood programming, the dysfunctional family systems, we had learned codependency, so that we lack a strong or stable sense of self, so that how we know ourselves is basically defined by somebody else. And that's just what we know. And so in that family system, boundaries weren't respected, or they were either almost non-existent by the people around you. So it wasn't available for you even to see, to know anything different. But then also this traditional, or I'll say conventional, popular way of thinking about boundaries is also backwards, and mostly describing the importance of boundaries or defining what they are, but still always coming from this place of you should do this. And so the boundaries are something that's definitive, static. It's something that this means something. And it's making it about other people, so that your focus is outside and you're not getting clear and congruent on what's going on for you. So that when we do start to practice and deliver our boundaries, we're delivering with an energy of trying to convince somebody or asking for permission. And so it either falls apart or it gets lots of resistance. So I'm going to skip this part because we're getting close on time. But basically this new approach of looking at as a container and actually doing boundaries, setting boundaries as an act of love for yourself, so that you can heal and fill up from the inside, so that your self-esteem rises, so that you're no longer trying to change other people. You're not trying to get them to understand how you feel or how their behavior makes you feel. You're not trying so hard to understand where they're coming from and making excuses for them, because that ends up being enabling a lot of times. And you're not thinking that someone else or that this relationship is more important than you. Because a life, like if there's someone that you're just like, oh, but I don't want to lose this relationship. For a long time, it was me and my husband. A life without this person is not the end of the world, but a life without me is. And so this boundary that I set means that I get me. I exist here, and here I am. And this is how I know. And it's delivered with a clarity so that there is no proving, no sense of doubt, and no asking for permission. It's just, here I am, and there's nothing to argue with. And we got to keep in mind that others get this too. We're all sovereign over our own spaces. And so that we start doing this for ourselves, and also to respect other people get to do this as well. And we're going to be doing it imperfectly, so it's a little bit messy. And so this is your container, your health, your happiness, your future. So are you loving you? And be honest about what you're eating, what you're saying to yourself. If you're taking enough rest, allowing yourself to have pleasure and joy, like setting work with boundaries. Because it's not just with other people, it's with our own old stories and old versions of ourselves, and some of the choices that we've been making. So anything that's going to lead to energetic leaks, stress, lack of clarity, any dilution of yourself, and anything that holds joy out, because joy and pleasure, that's what you need to make yourself available to, because that's what lights you up and lets you know there's more of you. So starting to make yourself more available to joy and pleasure, and making yourself unavailable to these old stories and justifications, and letting that stuff go. And then, and I'm getting so close to time, I'm saved the best for last, because the thing that no one's talking about with boundaries, that I can't believe it's not being talked about, is how good it feels when you show up for yourself. There's like a huge endorphin rush. And I don't know if that's particularly true. I don't have any research, but there's some sort of lit up, total alive euphoria, you know, and you kind of just are like, did I just do that? I just did that. And there's just like, so proud of myself. It feels good to be badass, to claim your sovereignty, to pronounce your future as bigger and better, and that I am worthy of more than all this bullshit that I've been tolerating for so long. I get to have it. And I said so by saying I'm unavailable to anything that doesn't support that, so that I absolutely make myself available to that which is, so that it feels good to do this. And it's not about proving or making yourself feel good. It's just a natural product of showing up for yourself in a way that expresses love. And when you come from that approach, that it's all about me being responsible for my space and the thoughts that I think, that the energy is so much clearer. There isn't anything to argue with, so that even though it may disrupt a system and people aren't necessarily going to like it at first, it ends up being a benefit for everyone, because then you actually become an example of, this is what self-love looks like in action. And here are my boundaries, and I don't compromise on them anymore. That when other people set a boundary, you actually know how to respect theirs as well. And so we're all going to be growing and getting better at this skill, and loving ourselves and filling ourselves up to where we're overflowing. So then we have a bunch of people just overflowing with love and happy to give each other space and support each other's space. Now, how different of a world is that? So these are the possibilities that I know exist with and because of boundaries. Like I'll just use my own, my divorce. I recognize my boundary is just, I just said enough. I had compromised on my bottom line and kept pushing that line to make this relationship work. And I finally said, no more. And yes, there's sadness and mourning and a pain in the ass having to get all the house ready to move and all that, but it's looking so good. And I recognize this house and this divorce is going to be a gift for someone else. And I actually get to go, like, because really the bottom line, our marriage container was too small. I needed more space, and I kept trying to shrink to fit into it. And when I do that and I'm in a lot of pain, I wasn't easy to be around either. So now that container has expanded, that I've come out of that I can be more available to other people in new situations. And so it's really a blessing to everybody, even though there is going to be some sadness and grieving and some hiccups and sticky issues with redefining who we are and how we are in the world. But it's every day, it's just more and more, I did this for me. And now I can show up even more powerfully as a coach to say, yes, this is how to do this for you. And this is the lit upness that I would like you guys to experience. So that if I know a couple of you on here already have been in a 90-day relationship or model and are totally badass, but if you're ready to take this to the next level, to talk with me so that we can set up a time and see that we're a good match, so that this lit up, alive, and space of sanctuary is yours to have and to hold for now and forevermore. And that's what you get. So that's my invitation for you. I would love to talk to you. Message me. You can reach out. You can, I think messaging me is the easiest, or email me if you're on my email list, and we'll set up a time to talk. But this is a new approach to boundaries that I think makes them a little bit simpler, a little bit less scary, and then being driven by self-love instead of having to prove yourself to anyone and therefore diluting the energy. So if you have any questions on this, feel free to ask me if you want to expand. And did you have a question, Ruth?
I do.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna put I put a boundary out with my sister, and I don't watch the news and I don't want to hear about the news. That's my boundary. And I was very specific about that. And this is her response. I know you don't like hearing about the news, but, and then continues to go into the news.
Yeah.
So how do you stop? I mean, how do I get her to see my boundaries?
Well, that again is where it's defined by your values, so that you know you want to maintain some level of connection with your sister, to where then it's going to take repetition and some persistence, because she is at least acknowledging that you said it.
Yeah.
So there is that. That's helpful. But just to be like, I really meant it when I said I'm not going to talk about the news. So I think you should tell somebody else about the news. Or what I've done with my mom is, you can tell me how the news has impacted you, but I don't just want to hear about like the vent session. And sometimes just be like, and it can be, and it's hard, but to be like, is this all you came to me with? Because I'm not the right person to come to this with. And
okay.
it just might take some repetition, because we've probably been in these patterns for a long time. And so coming out of them is also going to take a little bit of time. And it's also going to make you stronger in your ability to set them, speak them, and stand up for them. So no harm.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions before we hop off? Brandy, it's nice to see you. I don't think I've ever seen you on a Zoom. Welcome. All right. Well,
thank you. So, I'm sorry. I just recently discovered you through the through Sherry's
Prosperity Now Summit. Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, I just think you're amazing. And so I thought, oh, let me just hop on here. And I was like being all secretive and like keeping my video off and everything while I was still working and listening. But yeah, this is awesome. I love positivity and how it changes things. And I think this is an awesome platform that you're offering up to us. So I just want to take advantage of it. And thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And make sure you jump into Relationship Real Talk. It's on Facebook. And so then if you have questions, I can create a power hour around that, because I like to be a resource. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And again, I always say I look forward already to next week, because this is a part of my week that just lights me up. So thank you guys for sharing with me, and I will see you next week.
Bye.